The phone vibrated against my palm like a death sentence, its screen lighting up to tear through the dim bridal suite. 5 words ended 28 years of trying to be the perfect daughter. Dad cannot make it. Outside. 300 guests waited while the man I called father chose my sister's clumsy drama over walking me down the aisle. He did not know this absence was not a tragedy, but the opening shot in a war that would expose everything. My name is Louise Claiborne, and for the last 28 years, I have existed as a footnote in the chaotic biography of my sister. But in the suspended silence of the bridal suite, surrounded by the scent of fresh peonies and expensive hairspray, I was beginning to realize that footnotes are easily erased. The room was supposed to be a sanctuary. Instead, it felt like a mausoleum. The only sound was the rhythmic, mocking tick of the antique clock on the wall and the soft, friction-heavy rustle of my dress every time I shifted my weight. It was a custom Galia Le Havre, a masterpiece of French lace and architectural silk that had cost $15,000 10 minutes ago. It had felt like armor, a second skin of pearl and ivory that transformed me into the woman William Sterling deserved. Now, it felt like a straitjacket. It was constricting my ribs, pressing against my diaphragm, turning every breath into a shallow, desperate labor. I looked down at the phone in my hand. The screen had gone dark, but the message was burned into my retinas, glowing in the back of my mind with radioactive intensity. Serena is having a mental crisis about the launch. I have to stay. You handle it. That was it. No apology. No term of endearment. No, I love you. Just a logistical command issued from a father to a subordinate. You handle it. My body reacted before my mind could process the betrayal. It was not a scream. It was not a collapse. It was a total, terrifying paralysis. A coldness started at my fingertips, the hand holding the phone turning into a marble claw, and spread rapidly up my arm, seizing my chest. The air in the room seemed to vanish, sucked out by a giant, invisible vacuum. I blinked, and the room tilted. The beige walls of the hotel suite seemed to elongate, stretching upward like the bars of a prison cell. Then came the smell. It was impossible. Of course, my sister was miles away, presumably on the other side of the city, staging her crisis, but my brain, flooded with cortisol and the ancient, reptilian fear of the predator, conjured her presence. I smelled it distinctly. The cloying, aggressive sweetness of Chanel No. 5. It was Serena's signature scent, a perfume she applied with the subtlety of a chemical weapon. It was the smell that had permeated my childhood bedroom whenever she came in to borrow something without asking, or to leave a cruel note on my pillow. It was the smell of impending disaster. It filled my nostrils, choking me, overriding the delicate fragrance of the bridal bouquet sitting on the vanity. Louise? Honey? The voice belonged to Chloe, my maid of honor, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. I could feel the eyes of the other 4 bridesmaids on me. They were frozen in various stages of preparation, lipstick tubes hovering halfway to mouths, champagne flutes paused in midair. They knew something was wrong. The air had shifted. The joyous anticipation of a wedding morning had curdled into something heavy and sour. I looked up, catching my own reflection in the oversized, gilded vanity mirror. The woman staring back at me looked perfect. Her hair was swept up in a chignon that defied gravity. Her skin was flawless, airbrushed to porcelain perfection. But her eyes were dead. They were the eyes of a child who had waited on the porch for hours for a car that never pulled into the driveway. They were the eyes of the good daughter who had finally realized that goodness was not a currency that could buy love. I hated her. I hated that pathetic, hopeful woman in the mirror. A surge of hot, volcanic rage erupted from the pit of my stomach, shattering the paralysis. My arm moved without my permission. It was a violent, jagged motion, completely at odds with the elegance of my attire. I hurled the phone. It flew across the short distance between me and the vanity, spinning end over end like a black stone, and collided with the center of the mirror. Crack! The sound was satisfyingly sharp, a gunshot in the hushed room. The phone clattered onto the marble countertop, unharmed, but the mirror did not survive. A spiderweb of fractures bloomed instantly from the point of impact, splitting my reflection into a dozen disjointed pieces. My face was sliced apart, an eye here, a mouth there, a forehead severed from the rest. The image of the perfect bride was destroyed, replaced by a broken mosaic of anguish. "Oh my God!" someone gasped. I think it was Sarah, but I could not be sure. The bridesmaids flinched. Stepping back as if I had just pulled a knife, I stood there, heaving, my chest rising and falling against the tight bodice of the gown. The violence of the act had released the dam. The memories I had been suppressing, the excuses I had been making for Arthur Claiborne for 2 decades, came flooding back, drowning me. I was suddenly not in the hotel suite anymore. I was back at the Golden Oak, the steakhouse where my father had taken me 6 months ago to celebrate my engagement. The memory was high definition, saturated with the golden light of the restaurant's chandeliers. I could smell the rich, savory scent of prime rib and the woody aroma of aged mahogany. My father was sitting across from me, swirling a glass of Cabernet. He looked distinguished, the picture of a patriarch. He had reached across the table, covering my hand with his, a hand that felt warm and reassuring then, but felt like a lie now. "Louise," he had said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I have not always been there. I know Serena takes up a lot of the air in the room, but this is your time. Walking you down the aisle will be the highlight of my life. I will not let anything stand in the way of my youngest daughter's happiness. Not business, not Serena, nothing. You have my word. You have my word." The phrase echoed in the fractured mirror, bouncing off the shards of glass. A lie. It was all a lie. He had sat there, eating a $60 steak, looking me in the eye, and lying to my face. He knew, deep down, he must have known that if Serena snapped her fingers, he would come running. He was not a father. He was a hostage to her tantrums, and I was the collateral damage he was willing to sacrifice. The door to the suite opened briskly, breaking the spell of the flashback. Monica, the wedding planner, swept in. She was a woman of military precision, dressed in all black, with a headset permanently attached to her ear. She held a clipboard like a shield. She did not immediately notice the broken mirror or the terrified bridesmaids. She was focused on the timeline. "All right, ladies," Monica announced, her voice a sharp clap of efficiency. "We are at T-minus 45 minutes. The string quartet has started the prelude. Guests are being seated. I need the bridal party lined up for photos at 10. Louise, we need to do a final touch-up on the—" She stopped. Her eyes landed on the shattered glass. Then they shifted to me, taking in my heaving shoulders and the wild, feral look in my eyes. To her credit, she did not gasp. She was a professional. She simply lowered the clipboard slowly, her face hardening into a mask of damage control. "Okay," Monica said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming calm and authoritative. "Clear the room. Everyone out except the maid of honor. Now." The bridesmaids scrambled for the door. Relieved to escape the suffocating tension, the rustle of their dresses sounded like the wings of fleeing birds when the door clicked shut, leaving only me, Chloe, and Monica. The silence returned, heavier than before. "Louise," Monica said, stepping closer, careful not to crunch on any stray glass that might have fallen, though none had. "Talk to me. Is it cold feet? Because I have seen cold feet, and this looks more like a homicidal rage, which, for the record, I can work with, but I need to know the target." I pointed a shaking finger at the phone lying on the marble. "My father," I whispered. My voice sounded shredded, like I had been screaming for hours. "He is not coming." Chloe, who had been hovering near me, snatched up the phone. She read the message, her eyes widening. "That son of a bitch," she hissed. It was unladylike, crude, and exactly what I needed to hear. "I need to call him," I said, the desperation clawing at my throat, It was a pathetic impulse. I knew that. The text was final. But the little girl inside me, the 10-year-old who just wanted her daddy to look at her, refused to die. Maybe he just needs to hear my voice. Maybe if I tell him everyone is here. I grabbed the phone from Chloe's hand before she could stop me. My fingers fumbled over the screen, sliding on the sleek glass as I dialed his number. It rang. Ring, ring, ring. Each ring was a hammer blow to my chest. Pick up. Please, pick up. Tell me it is a joke. Tell me your phone was stolen. Tell me you are in the parking lot. You have reached the voicemail of Arthur Claiborne. I am currently unavailable. Please leave a message. His recorded voice was jovial, professional, the voice of a man who had it all together. I opened my mouth to leave a message, to beg, to scream. I did not know which, but then, just before the beep, in that half-second of silence where the recording ended but the line had not yet cut off, I heard it. It was faint. Ambient noise in the background of the recording he must have updated recently, or perhaps the line had just been left open for a fraction of a second too long on a previous call he had ignored. It was a laugh. It was high-pitched, breathless, and unmistakable. It was a giggle that bubbled up like champagne. Heh, heh, heh. Serena. It was not the sound of a woman in the midst of a mental health crisis. It was not the sound of a woman having a panic attack about a failed store launch. It was the sound of a woman who was winning. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated delight. The phone slipped from my ear, landing on the carpet with a dull thud. She was there. With him, and she was laughing. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no crisis. There was no emergency. This was a play, a scene orchestrated by Serena Claiborne, directed by her jealousy, and starring my father as the willing puppet. She had not just demanded he choose, she had made him choose today. She had waited until the very last second, until I was laced into my dress and the guests were in the pews, to pull the trigger. She wanted me to stand at the altar alone. She wanted me to feel the humiliation of being the abandoned bride. She wanted to prove, once and for all, that even on my wedding day, she was the protagonist of the family. My phone lit up again on the floor. A picture of Will appeared on the screen, a contact photo we had taken in Italy. The wind in his hair, his smile wide and genuine. New voicemail from Will. I stared at his face, my William, the man who loved me not because of who my father was, but in spite of it. He would be standing there at the altar in 45 minutes, looking at his watch, adjusting his cufflinks, waiting for the woman he adored. I could not listen to it. If I heard his voice right now, his kind, steady, loving voice asking me if I was okay, telling me he couldn't wait to see me, I would shatter. I was holding myself together with nothing but surface tension. One drop of genuine kindness would break me apart. I could not afford to be soft. Softness was what had gotten me here. Softness was believing my father's promises. Softness was thinking Serena could ever be a sister. I looked at Monica. I can't do it. You can't do what? Monica asked, her voice low. I can't go out there, I said. The words tasted like ash. I can't walk down that aisle alone. 300 people, Monica, 300 of Chicago's most judgmental, gossip-hungry elites. They all know who my father is. They all know about Serena. If I walk out there alone, they won't see a strong woman. They will see Arthur Claiborne's reject. They will see the girl whose own father didn't love her enough to show up. The panic was rising again. A black tide. I have to cancel. Tell them I am sick. Tell them the building is on fire. I don't care. I cannot face that room. I sank onto the velvet ottoman, the dress billowing around me like a cloud of defeated dreams. I buried my face in my hands, trying to block out the ticking clock, the fractured mirror, and the ghost of that high-pitched laugh that was still ringing in my ears. I was 28 years old, a creative director at a top agency, a woman who commanded respect in boardrooms. Yet at that moment, I was nothing more than a little girl crying in the dark, waiting for a daddy who was never coming home. The diamond on my left hand was heavy. It was a 3-carat oval solitaire set in platinum, a ring that William had designed himself because he said I deserved something that had no history, no baggage, and no ghosts attached to it. He had slipped it onto my finger 6 months ago under the starlight of a vineyard in Tuscany, promising that from that moment on, I would never have to be second best again. I looked at the stone now, catching the fractured light from the broken mirror. It was cold against my skin. It felt less like a promise and more like a paperweight holding down a stack of unread letters I'd been writing to my father since I was 10 years old. The paralysis in my limbs began to recede, replaced by a dull, aching familiarity. This feeling, this hollowed-out sensation of being the expendable option, was not new. It was the background radiation of my entire life. I sat on the velvet ottoman, the adrenaline fading into a bitter clarity, and I realized that I had spent 28 years rehearsing for this exact moment of abandonment. It started the day my mother died. I was 10. Serena was 14. The house was filled with the suffocating scent of lilies and the hushed murmurs of neighbors who had brought casseroles covered in aluminum foil. I remembered sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, clutching a stuffed bear my mother had bought me, feeling a hole opening up in the center of my chest that was so wide I thought the wind was blowing through it. I wanted my father. I needed him to tell me that the world had not ended, even though the sun had gone out. Then I heard the scream. It came from the living room. Serena. She was not just crying, she was performing. She had thrown herself onto the Persian rug, thrashing and wailing, knocking over a vase of hydrangeas in a display of grief that demanded every set of eyes in the room. I saw my father run past me. He did not stop. He did not look down at the 10-year-old girl shrinking into the banister. He rushed to Serena, scooping her up, his face etched with a frantic terror that belonged only to her. "I cannot breathe! Daddy, I cannot breathe!" she had shrieked, clutching his lapels. "I have got you, princess, I have got you," he soothed, rocking her back and forth. When I had tried to approach him later, tugging on his sleeve to ask if he would read to me so I could sleep, he had looked at me with exhausted, bloodshot eyes. "Not now, Louise," he had snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. "Your sister is sensitive. She is feeling this harder than anyone. You need to be the strong one, okay? Be a big girl for me." That was the contract signed in blood that day. Serena was the glass doll, and I was the packaging material. My grief was inconvenient. Hers was a catastrophe that required full-time management. I learned to mourn quietly, behind closed doors, because my father had only enough emotional bandwidth for one daughter, and he had made his choice. The pattern solidified like concrete as we grew older. It became the architecture of our family. I closed my eyes, and the bridal suite dissolved, replaced by the humidity of a Connecticut afternoon. It was my graduation from Yale. I was graduating summa cum laude with a degree in marketing. It was the proudest day of my life. I had spent 4 years studying, while Serena spent 4 years partying her way out of 3 different state colleges. I had saved 2 seats in the front row, one for Arthur Claiborne, one for Serena. As the procession started, the seats remained empty. I scanned the crowd, my heart hammering against my ribs, ignoring the dean's speech. I watched families cheering, fathers holding up cameras, mothers wiping away tears. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my robe. "Serena has terrible food poisoning. We are at the urgent care. She is so dehydrated. Louise, I cannot leave her side. Send us pictures." I walked across that stage alone. I shook the dean's hand alone. I accepted my diploma with a smile that felt like it was carved out of wood. Later that night, I saw the photos on social media. Serena was not at urgent care. She was tagged in a photo at a brunch spot in New Haven, looking bleary-eyed and disheveled, holding a mimosa. The food poisoning was a hangover. My father knew it. He had to know it. But he had chosen to hold her hair back while she vomited up expensive champagne rather than watch me accept the highest honors of my class. He paid for my tuition, but he never paid attention. I opened my eyes, staring at the ceiling of the bridal suite. The irony was suffocating. I had done everything right. I had built a career at Vanguard Horizon, becoming the youngest creative director in the firm's history. I managed million-dollar campaigns. I led teams of 40 people. I bought my own apartment in the Gold Coast. Every time I visited my father for Sunday dinner, I would try to share these victories. "Dad, we just landed the Coca-Cola account," I would say, desperate for a crumb of validation. "That is nice, honey," he would reply, buttering a roll without looking up. Then, immediately, his face would darken with concern. "But have you spoken to your sister? Her boutique in Wicker Park is struggling. The landlord is threatening eviction again. I might have to dip into my retirement to bail her out. She just has such bad luck, you know? The economy is so hard on small business owners." It was never bad luck. It was bad management. Serena treated her businesses like walk-in closets, taking inventory for herself and ignoring the books. But to Arthur Claiborne, she was a victim of circumstance, a fragile genius the world failed to understand. To him, my success was easy, automatic, and therefore unremarkable. Her failures were tragedies that required his wallet and his soul to fix. He was not a bad man in the traditional sense. He did not beat us. He did not starve us. But he was a coward. He was a man held hostage by his own guilt, a guilt Serena cultivated like a poisonous garden. She knew exactly which buttons to press to make him feel like he had failed her mother, and the only way to atone was to give Serena whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted it. And then there was Will. This was the root of the rot. This was why she had chosen today, of all days, to stage her coup. I met William Sterling 2 years ago at a charity gala. He was everything the Claiborne men were not: decisive, attentive, and emotionally present. When I brought him home to meet the family 3 months later, I saw the look in Serena's eyes. It was a predatory gleam. She saw Will not as my boyfriend, but as a shiny new toy she deserved simply because she existed. We were having drinks on the patio. I had gone inside to help my father with the hors d'oeuvres. Through the kitchen window, I watched them. Serena had moved her chair uncomfortably close to Will. She leaned forward, her hand grazing his knee, her voice dropping to that breathy register she used when she wanted something. I could not hear the words, but the body language was screaming. She was practically draping herself over him, flipping her hair, laughing too loudly at things that were not jokes. Then I saw Will's reaction. He did not smile politely. He did not inch away subtly. He stood up, moved his chair 3 feet to the left, and sat back down. His face was cold, his posture rigid. When I came back out with the tray, the air was thick with tension. Serena was red-faced. Downing her martini, Will looked at me, reached for my hand, and kissed my knuckles in front of her. "Your sister is very spirited," Will had told me later in the car. "But she tried to tell me you were boring. She said I needed someone who knew how to live. I told her I was quite happy with my life, and I asked her to please respect my relationship." Serena never forgave him for that rejection. To a narcissist, indifference is an insult, but rejection is a declaration of war. She hated him because he saw through her. She hated me because I had something she could not manipulate, seduce, or destroy. Until today. Today, she found the one thing she could destroy. If she could not have Will, and she could not have my career, she would take my father. She would take the symbol of his approval and smash it on the floor just to watch me bleed. "Louise," Chloe's voice cut through the haze. She was standing over me, her face pale. She was holding my phone again. It had buzzed. "Do not read it," Monica warned from the corner. "We are canceling. We are done." "No," I said. My voice surprised me. It was not the shaky whisper of a victim anymore. It was hard. "Read it, Chloe." Chloe hesitated, looking at the screen with disgust. He says, "Do not make a scene, Louise. It is just a short walk. You are a modern woman. You do not need a chaperone. We will make it up to you at the reception. Love, Dad." The silence that followed was absolute. Do not make a scene, just a short walk. Something inside me snapped. It was not a break. It was a realignment. For 20 years. I had been holding my breath, walking on eggshells, trying to be the low-maintenance daughter so I would not cause him stress. I had swallowed my anger, my hurt, and my pride. I had made myself small so there would be more room for Serena's ego. Just a short walk. He was reducing the most significant rite of passage in my life to a casual stroll. He was telling me that my feelings were a scene to be avoided. He was dismissing my pain because acknowledging it would mean admitting he was a terrible father. He expected me to do what I always did. He expected me to cry, fix my makeup, walk down the aisle with a brave smile, and lie to cover up his absence. He expected me to tell the guests he was sick. He expected me to protect his reputation while he sat in a hotel room enabling my sister's malice. I stood up. The motion was fluid, powerful. The Galia La Havre dress no longer felt like a cage. It felt like battle armor. He thinks I am sad, I said, my voice steady, cold as the bottom of Lake Michigan. I walked over to the vanity and looked at my fractured reflection. I did not see a broken girl anymore. I saw a woman who had just run out of forgiveness. He thinks I'm going to cry in here and then walk out there and make excuses for him, I continued, turning to face Chloe and Monica. He thinks he can send a text message and erase 28 years of negligence. I reached out and took the phone from Chloe's hand. I looked at the message one last time. Love, Dad. The word love looked like a typo. Monica, I said, looking the wedding planner in the eye. Do not cancel anything. We are not canceling. We are proceeding. You are going to walk alone? Monica asked, her pen hovering over her clipboard. No, I said, a dangerous smile touching the corners of my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized they held the detonator. I am not walking alone, and I am certainly not letting Arthur Claiborne dictate the narrative of this day. He wants to avoid a scene? Fine, I will not give him a scene. I will give him a reckoning. I looked at Chloe. Get your phone ready, and tell the tech team I need access to the projector system in the reception hall. If my father wants to be absent, I will make sure his absence is the loudest thing in the room. The sadness was gone, incinerated by a white-hot fury. I was done being the footnote. I was done being the shadow. If they wanted a drama, I would give them a masterpiece. Something is wrong with the timeline, Chloe said. She was not speaking as my best friend or my maid of honor in that moment. She was speaking as the senior vice president of public relations for one of the largest firms in Chicago. Her tears had dried instantly, replaced by the predatory focus she usually reserved for crisis management meetings, while the other bridesmaids were busy packing up the debris of the shattered mirror. Chloe was pacing the length of the suite, her phone rapid-firing under her thumbs. What do you mean? I asked, wiping a smudge of mascara from my cheek. The rage was still there, simmering like a coal fire. But Chloe's clinical tone forced me to engage my brain. Your father said Serena is having a mental crisis about the launch, Chloe said, not looking up from her screen. He said he had to stay to handle it. That implies a scene. That implies chaos. That implies something visible. She is dramatic, I said, my voice hoarse. She probably threatened to faint or screamed at a caterer. Louise, listen to me. Chloe stopped pacing and looked at me with laser intensity. Serena lives her life for the audience. If she was having a breakdown at her store launch, it would be a performance art piece. But more importantly, if there was a crisis big enough to keep Arthur Claiborne from his daughter's wedding, there would be digital smoke. I am scrubbing the geotags for her boutique. I am checking the hashtags. I am looking at the stories of the 3 influencers she bragged about inviting. She turned the phone screen toward me. It was blank. Nothing, Chloe declared. No ambulances, no police, no crying videos. In fact, there is 0 content from the last hour. If a launch is happening, the internet should be flooded. Silence in the middle of a major event is not a crisis. It is a blackout. It is deliberate. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Chloe was peeling back the skin of the lie, revealing the rot underneath. She moved the date, I said quietly. The realization made me feel nauseous. The gala, it was supposed to be next month. She moved it to today exactly 2 weeks ago. Chloe lowered her phone slowly. She moved her store gala to your wedding day? And you let her? I did not let her, I snapped, defending the ghost of my past self. She told Dad that the venue had a cancellation, and it was the only date available for the next 6 months. She said if she did not take it, she would lose her deposit and her momentum. She told him it was life or death for the business. I closed my eyes, and the memory of that conversation 2 weeks ago assaulted me. I was standing in my father's study. The room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. A smell that used to make me feel safe but now just smelled like stagnation. I had been pleading with him, my hands trembling. "Dad, you cannot be serious," I had said. "That is my wedding day. You cannot be at 2 places at once." Arthur Claiborne had sighed. Taking off his reading glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, a pose he struck whenever he wanted to avoid accountability. "Louise, be reasonable. The ceremony is at 4 in the afternoon. Serena's gala starts at 2. I just need to be there for the opening speech. Cut the ribbon and show my support. She is fragile right now. If I'm not there, she will spiral. You know how she gets." "I know how she gets, because you enable her," I had shouted, a rare outburst that made him flinch. "I need you, Dad. I need you to focus on me for one day. Just one day." He had looked at me then, his eyes pleading for me to be the bigger person, as always. "Your wedding is going to happen regardless. Louise, you have Will. You have the Sterling family. You are set. You are safe. Serena is drowning. Her survival depends on me right now. Whether or not I am standing next to you for 20 minutes does not change the fact that you are getting married, but my absence could destroy her confidence forever." It was a masterclass in manipulation. He had weaponized my stability against me. Because I was strong. I did not need him. Because Serena was a wreck. She owned him. "I tried to fix it," I told Chloe now, returning to the present. "I was so desperate to make sure he had no excuse. I hired the helicopter." Chloe's jaw dropped. "You did what?" "I rented a private helicopter," I confessed, the shame burning my cheeks. "It cost me $5,000. I arranged for it to pick him up from the roof of the building next to Serena's boutique at 3 o'clock. The flight time to the wedding venue is 15 minutes. He would have been here by 3:30, plenty of time to put on his tuxedo and walk me down the aisle. I handed him the itinerary myself. He agreed to it. He said it was a brilliant solution." $5,000, Chloe repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You paid $5,000 to ferry your own father to your wedding because he could not prioritize you for free. He agreed. Chloe, he promised. And yet," Chloe turned back to her phone, her thumbs flying again. "It is 3:15 right now. If he was on that chopper, he would be in the air. He would be texting you updates. But instead, he sends a text saying he is staying. Why? If the crisis is real, why not bring her with him? Why not throw her in the helicopter too?" She tapped the screen hard. "Wait, here, I found something." I rushed over to her side. "It is not from the boutique's tag," Chloe said, zooming in on a photo. "It is from a personal account of a D-list model Serena hangs out with, posted 4 minutes ago. It was a photo of a table cluttered with half-empty martini glasses, a silver ice bucket, and a plate of oysters. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a manicured hand clutching a clutch purse. I knew that hand. I knew the ring on the index finger, a gaudy emerald serpent that Serena claimed brought her wealth. "Check the caption," I whispered. Chloe read it aloud. "Pre-game with the bestie. No drama today. Just vibes. Sapphire Lounge." "The Sapphire Lounge," I said, my blood turning to ice. "That is a bar. That is not her store. That is a bar 3 blocks away from her boutique." "She is not having a crisis," Chloe said, her voice turning lethal. "She is at happy hour." The detective work was done. The verdict was in. There was no mental breakdown. There was no store emergency. Serena had staged a fake crisis to keep my father in the city, and then, once the cancel text was sent, she had dragged him out for drinks to celebrate her victory. She had probably told him she needed a drink to calm her nerves after the panic attack, and he, the eternal fool, had followed her. I felt a knock on the door, sharp and authoritative. Before anyone could answer, the door swung open. Eleanor Sterling walked in. If my father was a willow tree, bending to every wind Serena blew, Eleanor Sterling was an oak. She was 60 years old, dressed in a navy blue silk gown that cost more than my car. With silver hair coiffed into an impeccable bob, she was a woman who had taken over her husband's shipping empire when he died and doubled its value in 5 years. She did not tolerate fools, and she certainly did not tolerate tardiness. She took one look at the room. She saw the bridesmaids huddled in the corner. She saw the fragments of the mirror that hadn't been swept up yet. And she saw me, eyes red, foundation streaked, standing in a $15,000 dress like a soldier who had just lost the war. Eleanor did not gasp. She did not rush over to coddle me. She closed the door behind her with a firm click, locking out the noise of the hallway. "The guests are seated," Eleanor said, her voice calm and measured. "The string quartet has looped the prelude twice. People are starting to check their watches. I came to see if there was a wardrobe malfunction, but I see it is a personnel malfunction." She walked over to me, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. She stopped 2 feet away, invading my personal space in a way that felt grounding rather than aggressive. She reached out and lifted my chin with a cool, manicured finger. "Arthur is not coming, is he?" she asked. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "No," I whispered. I could not lie to her. "He had an emergency with Serena." Eleanor let out a single, sharp sound, a scoff that dismissed the entire existence of the Claiborne family drama. "Of course he did. That man has the backbone of a chocolate eclair." She dropped her hand and stepped back, looking me up and down. "So, this is it? You are going to let them win? You are going to stand here in the dark and let 300 people whisper about how poor Louise was abandoned again?" "I don't know what to do," I confessed, my voice breaking. "I cannot walk out there alone. Eleanor, everyone knows. They all know I'm the second choice. If I walk down that aisle by myself, I am just confirming it." Eleanor's expression softened, but only slightly. The steel remained. "Do you think you are the only woman who has had to amputate a limb to survive? Louise?" I looked at her, startled. "My father," Eleanor began, her gaze drifting to the window, "disowned me when I was 22. I wanted to marry a man who was new money. He told me that if I walked out the door, I was dead to him. He told me I would crawl back in a year." I had never heard this story. Will had never mentioned it. "On my wedding day," Eleanor continued, turning her gaze back to me, "I waited at the back of the church for 10 minutes, praying he would burst through the doors. He did not. I realized then that I had 2 choices. I could be the victim of his pride, or I could be the architect of my own future." She took a step closer, her eyes burning with a ferocity that made me straighten my spine. "I walked down that aisle alone, Louise, and I held my head so high that nobody dared to look at the empty space beside me. They only looked at me, and when I reached the altar, I realized I hadn't lost a father. I had shed a dead weight." She grabbed my shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "You have a family out there," she said, gesturing toward the door. "You have a man who has been standing at that altar for 20 minutes, sweating in a tuxedo, terrified that you have changed your mind. You have a mother-in-law who would burn this city to the ground if anyone hurt you. We are your family now. The blood in your veins is just biology. Family is who shows up." She looked at her diamond-encrusted watch. "You have 30 minutes, Eleanor declared, her voice ringing like a gavel. "You have 30 minutes to cry. You have 30 minutes to mourn the father you wish you had. Cry for the little girl who waited on the porch. Cry for the graduate who walked alone. Get it all out. Scream if you have to. She released my shoulders and walked to the door, placing her hand on the handle. But in 31 minutes, she said, looking back at me, you will wipe your face, you will fix that crown on your head, and you will walk out there and become the woman my son fell in love with. Do not let that empty chair define your value. Louise, make it irrelevant. She opened the door and left. The room was silent. Chloe looked at me, her eyes wide with reverence. Okay, Chloe said softly. You heard the woman. You have 30 minutes. Do you want me to get the tissues? Or do you want to break something else? I looked at the shattered mirror, then at the phone where the evidence of Serena's crisis sat frozen in pixels. The despair was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard resolve Eleanor had just poured into me. No tissues, I said, walking toward the bathroom to wash my face. Get the makeup kit. And Chloe, keep that screenshot. We are going to need it. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of the temperature tightening my skin and shrinking the capillaries that had turned my complexion blotchy. I patted my face dry with a plush white towel, careful not to rub, treating my skin like the expensive canvas it was. Eleanor Sterling was right. I had 30 minutes, not 30 minutes to wallow, but 30 minutes to reconstruct myself. I looked at the empty space beside me in the mirror. Walking alone would be a power move. It would be the feminist statement of the century, a declaration that I needed no man to validate my transition from maiden to wife. But as I stared at my reflection, a darker, more strategic thought coiled in my gut. If I walked alone, Serena would spin it. She would tell everyone at the reception that I was too difficult, too independent, that I had pushed our father away. She would paint a picture of a lonely, bitter woman who had driven her family off. She would feast on my isolation. I would not give her that satisfaction. I would not let her see me standing solitary. I needed an ally. I needed someone who represented the past. But the good parts of it, I needed someone who knew the truth about Arthur Claiborne. One name surfaced in my mind, rising from the murky depths of my family history like a buoy. Elias, my father's older brother, the man who had been erased from our family albums 20 years ago. The last time I had seen Uncle Elias, I was 8 years old. It was Thanksgiving. He had stood up at the dinner table, his face purple with rage, and pointed a carving knife at my father. "You are ruining those girls." "Arthur!" Elias had bellowed, his voice shaking the crystal glasses. "You are raising one to be a monster and the other to be a ghost. If you do not stop favoring Serena, you will rot in a hell of your own making." My father had thrown him out that night. He had forbidden us from ever speaking Elias's name again. He told us Elias was crazy, jealous, and dangerous, but I remembered the way Elias used to sneak me candy bars when Serena stole my Halloween candy. I remembered the way he looked at me, with recognition, not dismissal. "Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "Give me my phone." Chloe handed it over, her eyebrows raised. "Who are we calling? Please tell me it is not the police, although I would support that." "Better," I said. "My Uncle Elias?" "The exile?" Chloe whispered. She knew the stories. "Louise, nobody has seen him in 2 decades. Does he even live in Chicago anymore?" "I have his number saved," I said, my thumb hovering over a contact I had found in an old address book years ago and transferred to every new phone I bought. Just in case. I never had the courage to call it, but today seems like a good day for courage. I pressed the call button. The line rang. It was a long, jagged ring, the kind that sounded like it was traveling over miles of copper wire. Ring, ring, ring. "Yeah?" The voice was gruff, competing with the sound of wind and rushing water. "Uncle Elias?" I asked. My heart was hammering against my ribs harder than it had when I realized my father was missing. There was a pause on the other end. The wind noise died down, as if he had turned his back to the breeze or stepped into a shelter. "Louise?" He knew my voice. After 20 years of silence, he knew my voice instantly. "It is me," I said, fighting the lump in my throat. I am getting married today. I know, Elias said. His voice was gravel and honey. I saw the announcement in the Tribune. You look beautiful in the picture. Kid, just like your mother. The mention of my mother nearly broke me, but I held on. Uncle Elias, I need to ask you something impossible, and I need you to say yes. Arthur did not show up, did he? He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask where the wedding was. He went straight to the wound with the precision of a surgeon. No, I said, the word trembling. He chose Serena, again. That damn fool, Elias muttered. I heard the sound of a fishing reel clicking, a sharp, angry sound. I always knew he was weak, but I did not think he was heartless. I cannot walk down the aisle alone. Uncle Elias, I said, the tears threatening to return. I do not want to give them the pleasure of seeing me alone. I know it is crazy. I know we haven't spoken. But, where are you? He interrupted. The Saint? Regis? Downtown? I am at the harbor. Fishing. My heart sank. The harbor was 40 minutes away with Saturday traffic. Even if he left now, he would have to go home, change, and drive back. It would take over an hour. Oh, I said, looking at the clock. Okay, I understand. It was stupid to ask. Louise, stop, Elias commanded. His voice was firm, authoritative, the voice of a patriarch I had never had. I did not say I wasn't coming. I said I was fishing. I did not say I was unprepared. What? I have a tuxedo in the back of my truck, Elias said. It is a black Armani. I bought it 28 years ago when you were born. I told your mother that day. Sarah, if Arthur ever drops the ball, I will be ready to pick it up. I have kept it dry cleaned and pressed in a garment bag behind the driver's seat every single day since you got engaged. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. I am 30 minutes away, Elias said. I drive a truck with an engine that could outrun a police cruiser. You tell that organ player to stall for 5 minutes. I will be there. I will walk you down that aisle, Louise, and I will do it with a smile on my face. Thank you, I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. But these were different. These were tears of relief, of validation. Thank you, Uncle Elias. Do not thank me, kid, he said, his voice thickening with emotion. It is the honor of my life. Now hang up. I have to drive. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, staring at it in disbelief. The universe, which had taken so much from me, had just handed me a miracle. He is coming? Chloe asked, her eyes wide. He has had a tuxedo in his truck for 6 months, I said, a laugh bubbling up from my chest. He is coming. The mood in the room shifted instantly. The bridesmaids, sensing the change in tide, sprang into action. They were repowdering my nose, fixing the stray hairs in my chignon, fluffing the layers of my skirt. The energy went from funeral to festival in seconds. I sat down on the settee to catch my breath. Clutching my phone, I felt lighter. I felt invincible. And then, the phone buzzed again. It was not a text from Will. It was not a text from Elias. It was a notification from WhatsApp. New message in the Claibornes. I froze. That group chat had been dead for 4 years. It was a relic from a time when I still tried to organize family vacations. Before I realized nobody wanted to go anywhere with me, it included me, my father, and Serena. I had muted it years ago but never left. Perhaps out of some pathetic sentimental attachment. I opened the notification. The message was from Serena. Is she panicking yet? Do not answer her calls. Dad, just say traffic if she gets through. I need another round. This margarita is killer. The world stopped. The air in the room did not just leave. It solidified into glass. I stared at the screen. The words swam before my eyes, rearranging themselves into a weapon. Is she panicking yet? It was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not even a lie to protect feelings. It was sport. She was asking my father if I was suffering. She was actively coaching him on how to ignore me. And then, the kicker. She was ordering a drink. She was celebrating. She was sitting in a bar, drinking a margarita, laughing about the fact that her little sister was supposedly crumbling in a bridal suite miles away. "Chloe," I said. My voice was so cold it hurt my throat. Chloe looked over, saw my face, and immediately dropped the lipstick she was holding. She was at my side in a millisecond. "What?" she demanded. I held up the phone. I watched Chloe read the message. I saw the blood drain from her face. And then I saw the fire enter her eyes. "That absolute," Chloe trailed off, her fingers twitching. "She sent that to the wrong group. She meant to send that to him privately." "She is drunk," I said. "She is sloppy." "She is going to delete it," Chloe said, her voice turning sharp and urgent. "Louise, she is going to realize in 5 seconds that she sent that to the group with you in it. She is going to unsend it." "Screenshot it," I commanded. Chloe did not hesitate. She whipped out her own phone, aimed the camera at my screen, and snapped a picture. Then she took my phone from my hand and pressed the volume down and power button simultaneously. Click. "Got it," Chloe said, exhaling. "I have it on your phone, and I have a photo of it on mine. 2 copies." Almost instantly, the message on my screen vanished. This message was deleted. A new message popped up from Serena immediately after. "Oops, wrong chat. Ignore that. Love you guys." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She thought she was safe. She thought she had scrubbed the evidence. She thought I was too busy crying, too busy falling apart, to be monitoring an old WhatsApp group. She thought I was the same Louise I had always been, the one who missed the details, the one who forgave the slights. She was wrong. "She thinks I did not see it," I whispered. "She thinks you are stupid," Chloe corrected, her voice dripping with venom. "She thinks you are a doormat." I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. The city looked different now. It was no longer a towering, intimidating monster. It was a playground, and I was holding the rulebook. The grief I had felt earlier, the heavy, suffocating blanket of abandonment, was gone. In its place was something sharper, cleaner. It was the clarity of a judge who has just seen the murder weapon. For 20 years, I had wondered if I was the problem. I had wondered if I was just too sensitive, too demanding, too needy. I had let them gaslight me into believing that my father's neglect was a byproduct of his difficult life, and that Serena's cruelty was just sisterly teasing. But this text message was the Rosetta Stone. It translated decades of confusion into a simple, brutal truth. They did not care. They did not just not care. They actively enjoyed my pain. My suffering was their entertainment. My wedding day was not a milestone to them. It was an episode of a reality show they were directing. "Louise?" Chloe asked tentatively. "What do you want to do? Do you want to reply? Do you want to call her out right now?" I turned back to the room. My reflection in the remaining glass of the window showed a woman who looked calm, terrifyingly calm. "No," I said. "Do not reply. Do not read it. Do not give her the blue ticks." "Silence?" Chloe asked. "Silence," I confirmed. "Let her think she got away with it. Let her think I am sitting here oblivious, waiting for Daddy. Let her think she is safe." I looked at the phone in Chloe's hand. That screenshot was not just a picture. It was a nuclear bomb. And I was not going to detonate it in a text message. I was not going to waste it on a private argument that they could deny later. I was going to wait. I was going to wait until they felt the most secure, the most triumphant. I was going to wait until they were standing in front of everyone, playing their roles, smiling their fake smiles. "Send that screenshot to the projectionist," I told Chloe. "Tell him to add it to the slideshow. Tell him to put it at the very end, and tell him not to play it until I give the signal." Chloe smiled. It was a wicked, beautiful smile. "You are terrifying. I love it." "I am not terrifying," I said, smoothing the silk of my dress. "I am just finally playing the game." The door opened, and Monica poked her head in. 10 minutes. Ladies, we need to move to the staging area." I took a deep breath. I felt the weight of the last 3 decades lifting off my shoulders. I did not need Arthur Claiborne. I did not need his approval, his money, or his presence. I had my chosen family. I had Elias speeding down the highway. I had Eleanor holding the fort. I had Will waiting at the altar. And I had the truth, captured in high definition, waiting in my pocket. "Let's go," I said, grabbing my bouquet. The white peonies were fresh and vibrant, indifferent to the chaos. "I have a wedding to attend." I walked out of the suite without looking back at the broken mirror. I did not need to see my reflection anymore. I knew exactly who I was. I was the woman who was about to burn the house down, and I was going to look spectacular doing it. The hallway outside the main sanctuary of the saint. Regis was a corridor of hushed anticipation. The walls were lined with cream-colored silk, and the floor was an expanse of polished marble that echoed even the softest footfall. Behind the heavy double doors at the end of the hall, I could hear the muted, swelling strains of the string quartet playing a prelude. It was a sound that should have been soothing, but to me, it sounded like a countdown. 10 minutes, Monica whispered, checking her headset. Her voice was tight. "We are at 10 minutes. Louise, if he is not here..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. I stood by a large arrangement of white hydrangeas, clutching my bouquet so tightly the stems were beginning to bruise. My heart was doing a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a physical manifestation of the hope I was trying to suppress. I had spoken to Uncle Elias. I knew he was coming. But the trauma of the last 3 hours, the trauma of the last 28 years, was a hard habit to break. Part of me, the part that had been trained by Arthur Claiborne, was expecting another phone call, another excuse, another flat tire, another betrayal. Eleanor Sterling stood by the entrance, her back straight as a rod. She was acting as a physical barrier between me and the guests, ensuring no stray aunt or curious cousin could wander backstage and see the bride waiting alone. She looked like a sentinel, her navy gown absorbing the light, her eyes fixed on the elevator banks down the hall. "He will be here," Eleanor said, sensing my anxiety without turning around. "If he said he is coming, he is coming. Men of that generation, the good ones, at least, treat their word like a contract, as if summoned by her faith." The elevator bell chimed, a soft, clear ding that cut through the murmur of the hotel staff. The doors slid open. For a second, nobody moved. And then, he stepped out. Uncle Elias did not look like the polished, country club mannequins that populated my father's social circle. He looked like a storm that had been forced into a suit. His hair, gray and windblown, was slightly disheveled. His face was flushed red, covered in a sheen of perspiration that spoke of a desperate sprint through a parking lot. He smelled faintly of Lake Michigan, of algae and cold water and gasoline, a scent that clashed violently with the expensive perfumes of the hotel. But he was wearing the tuxedo. It was a black, double-breasted Armani, cut in the style of the late 90s. It was clearly older, the lapels slightly wider than the current fashion, but it was immaculate. There was not a wrinkle, not a speck of dust. It fit him across the shoulders with a military precision. He had kept his promise, for 28 years. While my father had been missing birthdays and graduations, this man had been keeping a suit in a garment bag, waiting for the day he might be needed. He marched down the hallway, ignoring the startled looks of the catering staff. His eyes were scanning the corridor until they locked onto me. The tension in his shoulders dropped instantly. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since he hung up the phone. "I made it," he rasped, his voice rough. He stopped a few feet away, afraid to hug me and ruin my dress with his sweat. Traffic on Lakeshore Drive was a parking lot. I had to drive on the shoulder for a mile. "I think I have 3 tickets coming in the mail." I looked at him, my throat closing up. He looked so much like my father, yet so completely different. They shared the same jawline, the same eyes, but where my father's face was soft with indulgence and weakness, Elias's face was etched with lines of hard work and harder choices. Eleanor stepped forward. I held my breath, wondering how these two powerful forces would collide. Eleanor looked Elias up and down. She took in the wind-blown hair, the dated tuxedo, and the honest sweat. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face, the first real smile I had seen her give anyone other than Will. "You cut it close, Mr. Claiborne," she said, extending her hand. "Elias," he corrected, taking her hand and shaking it firmly. "And I would have swum here if the truck broke down, ma'am." "I believe you would," Eleanor said. "I am Eleanor. We are currently short one father of the bride. Are you applying for the position?" "I have been applying for the position since 1998, Elias said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "I'm just finally getting the interview." Eleanor nodded, a gesture of profound respect. "Then you better get in there. You have a daughter to walk." She stepped aside, giving us space. Elias turned to me. His eyes were shimmering. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket. His hand was trembling slightly, not from age, but from adrenaline. "I have something for you," he said. "I was not sure if I should give it to you. I did not want to upset you on your big day, but after what Arthur did today, I think you need to know." He pulled out a small object wrapped in a blue velvet cloth. It was old, the velvet worn down at the corners. He unfolded it slowly. Resting on the blue fabric was a hair comb. It was silver, intricate and delicate, shaped like a spray of lilies of the valley, encrusted with tiny pearls and sapphires. I gasped. The air left my lungs. "Mom's comb," I whispered. My hands flew to my mouth. "I thought it was lost. I haven't seen this since I was 18. I remembered the day it disappeared. I had come home from my first year of college to find my jewelry box raided. My father had told me there had been a break-in. He said the burglars had taken some old things. I had mourned this comb for years. It was the only thing my mother had left me specifically for my wedding day. "It wasn't lost, Louise," Elias said, his voice hard with suppressed anger. "And there was no break-in." He looked me in the eye, forcing me to confront the truth. 10 years ago, Serena wanted to open her first pop-up shop. She needed $20,000 for the lease and inventory. Arthur didn't have the cash liquid at the moment, so he took this. The world tilted on its axis. My father had stolen my inheritance, my mother's legacy, to fund one of Serena's failed whim projects. "He went to a pawn shop on State Street," Elias continued. "He was going to sell it for scrap silver and stones. The owner of the shop knows me. He called me because he recognized the piece from your mother's photos. I drove down there and bought it from the owner before Arthur could finalize the ticket. I paid him double what Arthur wanted, just to keep it off the books." I stared at the silver lilies. My father hadn't just neglected me. He had looted me. He had cannibalized my memories to feed Serena's ego. "I have kept it in my safe deposit box for 10 years, Elias said softly, "waiting for the day you would need it. Arthur thinks it is gone. He thinks he sacrificed it for the greater good of the family. He doesn't know that the only thing he sacrificed was his honor." He held it out to me. "It belongs to you, Louise. It always has." I reached out, my fingers brushing the cool metal. I felt a surge of emotion that was so powerful it almost knocked me over. But it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Total, absolute clarity. Arthur Claiborne was not just a weak man. He was a thief, and Elias was the guardian I never knew I had. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking. "Uncle Elias, Don't," he said, shaking his head. "Just put it on. Let's finish what Sarah started." Chloe stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "Let me help." She took the comb and carefully slid it into the side of my chignon. It fit perfectly, as if the hairstyle had been designed around it. I turned to the large mirror in the hallway. The transformation was instant. The comb caught the light, the sapphires gleaming like blue fire. It was a piece of my mother, a piece of truth, reclaiming its place. I looked at myself. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. The girl who wanted her daddy to love her was gone. In her place stood a woman who survived, A woman who was loved, not by the people who should love her, but by the people who chose to. Just then, the heavy oak door of the sanctuary cracked open. A young usher, no older than 16, slipped out. He looked terrified to be interrupting, but he held a folded piece of paper in his hand. "Excuse me," he squeaked. "For the bride. From the groom. He said it was urgent." Chloe took the note and handed it to me. It was written on the back of a program. The handwriting was messy. Hurried. Will's handwriting. "Louise, I know something is happening back there. I can feel it. But I want you to know one thing. I am standing here. My feet are glued to this floor. I am not going anywhere. If you need 5 minutes, take an hour. If you need to come in through the side door, do it. Even if you have to walk down here alone, know that you are not walking into a void. You are walking toward me. The destination is me, and I will be here until the lights go out. Love, Will." I pressed the note to my chest. A sob escaped my throat. But it was a happy one. He knew. He didn't know the details, but he knew the dynamic, and he was offering me the one thing my father never had: stability. "He is a good man," Elias said, looking at the note. "I like him already." "He is the best," I said. I handed the note to Chloe for safekeeping. I smoothed down the front of my silk gown. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of the hotel, smelling the hydrangeas and the faint, comforting scent of Elias's lake water. "I am ready," I said. Monica nodded, pressing her hand to her headset. "Okay, everyone. Places. We are going live. Cue the cannon in D." The bridesmaids lined up. Chloe gave me a fierce wink and took her position at the front. Eleanor squeezed my arm one last time. "Give them hell, darling," Eleanor whispered, and then she slipped through the side door to take her seat. It was just me and Uncle Elias. He offered me his arm. It was a strong arm, solid muscle beneath the wool of the tuxedo. I looped my hand through the crook of his elbow. I felt anchored. I felt safe. "You look like a queen," Elias said, looking down at me. "Arthur is going to regret this day for the rest of his miserable life." "I am not doing this for Arthur," I said, looking at the closed doors ahead of us. "I am doing this for me, and for Mom." "Good answer," Elias grinned. The music inside changed, the prelude ended, and the opening chords of Pachelbel's canon began to swell. It was the cue. The heavy doors began to swing open slowly. A beam of golden light from the sanctuary spilled into the hallway, widening with every second. I could see the backs of the guests. I could see the flowers. I could see the long white runner stretching out like a road to the future. Elias leaned in close, ready to show them what they lost. "Daughter?" he whispered. He called me daughter. It was natural. It was earned. I lifted my chin. I felt the weight of my mother's comb, the strength of Elias's arm, and the pull of Will's love. "I am ready," I said. We stepped into the light. The first note of canon in D was not just a sound. It was a physical vibration that traveled through the floorboards of the saint, Regis, and settled into the soles of my satin heels. It was the melody I had chosen when I was 12 years old, dreaming of a fairy tale that involved a father who adored me. Now, as the heavy oak doors began to groan open, parting like the curtains of a theater, that melody signaled something different. It was no longer the soundtrack to a fantasy. It was the anthem of a revolution. The light from the sanctuary hit me first. It was a golden, late-afternoon wash that poured into the dim hallway, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For a split second, I was blinded. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the brilliance, and then the room came into focus. The scale of it took my breath away. 300 people were seated in the cathedral-style ballroom. The space was a sea of pastel florals, dark suits, and the shimmer of expensive jewelry. As the doors swung fully open to reveal me, the entire room seemed to inhale in unison. Then came the turn. It happened in a ripple effect. Starting from the back pews and flowing toward the altar, heads turned, Necks craned, bodies shifted in their seats. 600 eyes locked onto the doorway, expecting to see Arthur Claiborne, the benevolent patriarch, the successful businessman, the man who had charmed them all at cocktail parties for decades. Instead, they saw me, and they saw Elias. The silence that followed the initial gasp was heavy, textured with confusion. I could hear the rustle of silk as people leaned in to whisper to their neighbors. The sound was like the hissing of steam escaping a valve. Is that? Where is Arthur? Is that his brother? The one who? My God, it is Elias. I felt Elias's arm tense beneath my hand, but it was not out of fear. It was a protective reflex. He stood beside me like a granite cliff, unbothered by the waves crashing against him. He held his head high, his jaw set in a line of defiance that dared anyone to speak a word of disrespect. "Chin up," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the music. "Walk." I took the first step. Time seemed to distort, stretching out into a slow-motion dreamscape. Every sensory detail was amplified. I could feel the drag of my 15-foot train gliding over the white carpet runner. I could smell the heavy scent of the Casablanca lilies lining the aisle. I could see the individual expressions on the faces of the guests as I passed them. To my left, in the third row, sat my Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert, my father's younger siblings. These were the people who had spent every Thanksgiving for the last 20 years praising Serena's creativity while asking me why I was still single or why I worked so hard. They were the enablers, the flying monkeys to Serena's witch. As I approached their row, I saw the blood drain from Aunt Sarah's face. She looked from me to Elias, and her hand flew to her pearl necklace. She recognized him instantly, the brother they had cast out, the truth-teller they had silenced. Seeing him there, looking dignified and strong in his vintage tuxedo, walking the niece they had all neglected, seemed to physically shrink her. She could not hold my gaze. She looked down at her lap, her face flushing with a deep, crimson shame. Uncle Robert stared open-mouthed, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for Arthur to jump out and correct this glitch in the matrix. But Arthur was not there, and his absence was screaming louder than any presence could have. I kept walking. I did not look down. I did not look at the guests who were now whispering furiously behind their hands. I fixed my eyes on the end of the aisle. William Sterling was waiting. He stood at the altar, framed by an arch of white roses and greenery. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo that tailored his broad shoulders perfectly. His hands were clasped in front of him, but I could see his knuckles were white. He had been terrified that I wouldn't come. He had been terrified that the Claiborne madness would finally swallow me whole. When our eyes met, the rest of the room dissolved. The whispering guests, the judgmental relatives, the scandal. It all faded into a blur of background static. Will's face broke open. It was a look of such raw, unadulterated pride that it nearly knocked the wind out of me. He did not look confused by Elias's presence. He did not look worried about the optics. He looked at me as if I were the only person on the planet. His eyes were wet, shining with tears he made no effort to hide. He mouthed one word to me across the distance: beautiful. That single word shattered the last remnants of the unwanted daughter living inside my ribcage. I was not walking toward a man who would tolerate me. I was walking toward a man who celebrated me. As we neared the front, the murmurs grew louder. But the tone had shifted. The initial shock was giving way to something else: respect. The guests were beginning to understand the narrative. They saw a bride standing tall despite the empty space where her father should be. They saw an uncle stepping up to fill the void. The story was rewriting itself in real time, from a tragedy of abandonment to a triumph of resilience. We reached the steps of the altar. The music swelled to a crescendo and then softened, leaving a hum of anticipation in the air. The officiant, a kind-faced man named Reverend Thomas, who had known Will's family for decades, looked at us with a gentle smile. He cleared his throat. But before he could begin the standard protocol, Elias raised his hand slightly. The room went deathly quiet. Even the ventilation system seemed to pause. Elias turned to face Will. He did not let go of my hand immediately. He held it for a second longer, squeezing my fingers, a silent transfer of strength. Then, he looked at the congregation, his voice projecting without a microphone, booming with the authority of a man who has nothing left to lose. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the Reverend asked. Though the question felt heavier than usual, Elias took a breath. He looked directly at the empty seat in the front row where Arthur Claiborne should have been, a seat that was conspicuously vacant, marked by a reserved sign that now looked like an accusation. Then he looked back at Will. "On behalf of those who actually showed up," Elias said, his voice ringing off the vaulted ceiling, "and on behalf of those who truly love her, I do—" The words landed like granite blocks. "Actually showed up. Truly love her." A collective gasp ripped through the room, followed by a stunned silence. It was a public indictment. It was a declaration of war. Elias had not just given me away, he had exposed the rot at the core of my family tree in one sentence. He took my hand and placed it in Will's. The contact was electric. Will's hand was warm, solid, and shaking slightly. He gripped my fingers tight, pulling me toward him as if to say, "I have you. You are safe now." Elias stepped back, nodding once to Will, and then took his place in the front row, sitting right next to Eleanor Sterling. Eleanor reached over and patted his hand, a public gesture of alliance that did not go unnoticed by the whispering crowd. The ceremony proceeded, but the energy had shifted. The air was charged with a raw, emotional intensity that is rare in high society weddings. This was no longer a pageant. It was real life when it came time for the vows. Will went first. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, his voice thick with emotion as he promised to love me, to honor me, and to be my shelter. His vows were beautiful, poetic, and perfect. Then it was my turn. I had written vows weeks ago. They were safe vows. They were pretty words about love and laughter and growing old together. I had memorized them. But as I stood there, holding Will's hands, looking into his eyes, those words felt insufficient. They felt like they belonged to the Louise who was trying to please everyone. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment. I looked at the index cards in my hand, and then I lowered them. "I wrote a speech," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone clipped to my bodice. "I wrote about how much I love your smile, and how you make the best coffee, and how I cannot wait to travel the world with you, and all of that is true." I paused, looking at him with an intensity that burned. But today, love means something different to me. Today, I learned that love is not a feeling. Love is a verb. Love is an action. Love is showing up. I heard a sniffle from the front row. Chloe, burying her face in a handkerchief. "So my vow to you is simple. Will," I continued, abandoning the script entirely. "I vow to show up. I vow that when things are hard, I will be there. I vow that when the world is falling apart, I will be standing right next to you, not hiding, not making excuses, not sending a substitute. I vow that you will never have to look for me in a crowded room and wonder where I am. I vow to be your family, the kind of family that stays." A tear slipped down Will's cheek. He squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. "I choose you," I finished, my voice breaking slightly but regaining its strength instantly. "I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day that follows. I choose us." "I choose us," Will whispered back, his voice barely audible. "You may kiss the bride," the Reverend announced, his own eyes shining. Will did not hesitate. He pulled me in, his arm wrapping around my waist, lifting me slightly off the ground. The kiss was not polite. It was passionate, desperate, and reclaiming. It was a seal on the contract we had just written in front of 300 witnesses. When we broke apart, the room exploded. It wasn't the polite, golf clap applause of a standard wedding. It was a roar. People were standing up, my friends, Will's family. Even strangers who had been moved by the drama of the moment, they were cheering. It was a release of tension, a celebration of the underdog winning. I turned to face the crowd, hand in hand with my husband. I saw the sea of faces. I saw the joy. I saw the tears. And in the front row, I saw the empty seat where Arthur Claiborne was supposed to be. It didn't hurt anymore. I looked at that empty chair and felt nothing but a cool detachment. It was just a piece of furniture. My eyes moved to the seat next to it, to Elias, who was clapping his large, calloused hands, a grin splitting his face, to Eleanor, who was dabbing her eyes with poise, to Chloe, who was pumping her fist in the air. We walked back down the aisle, the recessional music upbeat and triumphant. I did not look at Aunt Sarah. I did not look at Uncle Robert. I walked past them as if they were ghosts. I had walked in with a substitute father, but I walked out with a real husband. And as we stepped through the double doors and into the foyer, leaving the whispers and the judgment behind, I knew the real show was just beginning. The reception was waiting, the projector was waiting, and the truth was about to drop like a guillotine. "You okay?" Will asked, leaning close to my ear as the doors closed behind us, muffling the applause. I looked up at him, fingering the sapphire comb in my hair. "I am better than okay," I said, a dangerous spark lighting up my eyes. "I am ready for the second act," Will grinned, a knowing look in his eyes. "I love the second act. That is when the villains get what is coming to them." "Exactly," I said, smoothing my dress. "Let's go greet our guests. I believe we have some uninvited visitors arriving soon." The grand ballroom of the Saint. Regis was a masterpiece of kinetic energy. The ceiling, soaring 20 feet high, was draped in cascades of white wisteria and fairy lights that twinkled like a galaxy brought down to earth. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Lake Michigan was a vast, dark canvas reflecting the city lights, its surface churning with the same restless energy I felt beneath my skin. Waiters in white gloves moved through the room like ghosts, topping off champagne flutes and replacing silverware with silent efficiency. The jazz band was playing a smooth, upbeat rendition of "The Way You Look Tonight," and the laughter of 300 guests created a warm, buzzing hum that almost made me forget the bomb ticking in my pocket. Will and I were doing the rounds, moving from table to table. It was the obligatory victory lap of the newlyweds. But tonight, it felt like a press conference. Louise, darling, Mrs. Vanderwall, a formidable matriarch of the Chicago art scene, clutched my hand with bejeweled fingers. The ceremony was breathtaking. "And your uncle? My goodness, what a presence. I haven't seen Elias in years. He looks marvelous, so rugged." She paused, her eyes darting around, hungry for gossip. "And Arthur? I hope he's all right? We heard whispers of an emergency." "Dad had a conflict," I said, my smile fixed and dazzling. I squeezed Will's arm, but we were so lucky Uncle Elias could step in. He really saved the day. "He certainly did," Will added, his voice smooth. "We are very grateful." We moved on before she could dig deeper. This was the dance. Everyone knew something was wrong. Arthur Claiborne did not miss social events unless he was in a coma or in jail. But nobody dared to ask the direct question. They just circled the perimeter, sniffing for blood. At table 5, Uncle Elias was holding court. He had a scotch in one hand and was regaling a group of Will's college friends with a story about ice fishing in the Upper Peninsula. They were hanging on his every word. He looked comfortable, expansive, a man who had finally come home. When he saw me approach, he winked. "Doing okay, kid?" he asked. Sotto voce. "Better than okay," I whispered back. "You are a hit." "I am just the novelty act," he chuckled. "Enjoy it while it lasts." We were about an hour into the reception. The salads had been cleared, and the main course, a filet mignon with truffle reduction, was being served. The atmosphere was settling into a contented lull. The tension of the ceremony had dissipated, replaced by the alcohol-fueled relaxation of a good party, and then, the double doors at the main entrance slammed open. It wasn't a polite opening, it was a breach. The heavy thud echoed through the ballroom, cutting through the jazz music like a gunshot. Heads turned, forks paused halfway to mouths. The hum of conversation died instantly, replaced by a confused silence. Standing in the doorway was Arthur Claiborne. He looked like he had just run a marathon through a wind tunnel. His tie was askew, his hair was a mess of frantic tufts, and his forehead was glistening with sweat. His tuxedo jacket was unbuttoned, revealing a shirt that was partially untucked. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving in a performance of extreme physical exertion. "I made it!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with emotion. He stumbled into the room, scanning the crowd wildly. "I made it! Louise!" Behind him, like a shark following a chum trail, came Serena. If Arthur was the picture of chaotic desperation, Serena was the picture of calculated malice. She was not disheveled. She was pristine. Her makeup was flawless. A smoky eye that was a little too heavy for a wedding, and lips painted a deep, aggressive crimson. But it was her dress that made the air leave the room. She was wearing a floor-length gown of cream silk. It was not beige. It was not champagne. It was cream. In the warm lighting of the ballroom, it looked white. It was a slinky, backless number that hugged every curve, designed to draw every eye. It was a bridal gown in everything but name. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Even the waiters stopped moving. Wearing white to a wedding was the cardinal sin of etiquette, a declaration of war that every woman in the room understood instantly. Arthur did not seem to notice the silence or the shock. He spotted me standing near the head table and broke into a run, a clumsy, loping jog that was meant to look heroic. "Louise!" he cried out again, arms wide open. "Oh, thank God! I told the driver to run every red light. I couldn't miss it. I couldn't miss my baby girl's night." He reached me in seconds. He smelled of stale traffic fumes and something else, mint. He had chewed gum to cover his breath. He lunged to hug me, expecting the dutiful daughter to melt into his arms, to weep with gratitude that he had finally deigned to show up. He expected me to save face for him, to play along with the heroic father narrative he was constructing. I didn't move. I didn't step forward. I didn't raise my arms. Instead, I took one deliberate step back. It was a small movement, maybe 6 inches, but in the language of our relationship, it was a canyon. Arthur froze. His arms were left hanging in midair, embracing nothing but empty space. He blinked, confusion clouding his frantic expression. He looked at my face, searching for the soft, forgiving Louise he knew. He found a stranger. "Louise?" he faltered, his voice dropping. "Honey, it is Daddy. I am here. I am so sorry about the ceremony. There was a terrible accident on the bridge. Traffic was stopped for miles." "An accident?" I repeated. My voice was calm, projected perfectly so the nearby tables could hear. "Strange. Uncle Elias drove in from the harbor at the exact same time. He said traffic was heavy, but he made it." Arthur flinched at the name. "Elias? Elias is here?" He looked around, his eyes landing on his brother sitting at table 5. Elias raised his Scotch glass in a mock toast, his expression unreadable. Arthur paled. Before he could speak, Serena slithered into the gap between us. She placed a hand on Arthur's arm, acting the part of the supportive sister, but her eyes were locked on me with a cold, glittering amusement. "Oh, Louise, stop it," she said, her voice pitched high and breathy, feigning distress. "Don't be mean. Daddy has been losing his mind trying to get here. I told him, 'Daddy, don't go. You are too upset. You will have a heart attack.' But he insisted. He said, 'I have to see Louise.'" She turned to the crowd, flashing a dazzling, victimized smile. "I am the one you should be mad at," she announced, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I had such a terrible panic attack today. The stress of the launch just collapsed. Poor Daddy didn't know what to do. He couldn't leave me alone." She looked at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "You know how I get wheezy? I can't help it. But look, We are here now. Better late than never, right? She reached out to touch my arm. That was the moment the temperature in the room dropped to absolute zero. I looked at her hand, the hand with the emerald ring that had held a martini glass an hour ago. I looked at her dress, the white dress meant to upstage me, and I looked at my father, who was nodding vigorously, eager to latch onto her excuse. Yes, yes, Arthur stammered. Serena was in a bad way, but she rallied. She rallied just for you. Louise. A shadow fell over us. Uncle Elias had left his table. He moved with a speed that belied his age. He stepped in front of me, placing his large, tuxedo-clad back between me and them. He was a wall, a fortress. Back off, Arthur, Elias growled. His voice was low, dangerous, a rumble of thunder before the storm. Arthur recoiled, startled by the physical barrier. Elias? What the hell do you think you are doing? Get out of my way. That is my daughter. She was your daughter this morning, Elias said, crossing his arms over his chest. She was your daughter when you promised to walk her down the aisle. She was your daughter when she begged you to come. But you didn't show up. Artie, I did. I had an emergency, Arthur shouted, his face turning red. Family comes first. Exactly, Elias shot back. Family comes first. That is why I'm standing here. And you are standing there looking like a fool who forgot how to button his jacket. The room was dead silent now. Nobody was eating. Nobody was drinking. 300 people were witnessing the implosion of the Claiborne dynasty in real time. Serena stepped forward, trying to bypass Elias. Excuse me, Uncle Elias, she sneered, dropping the sweet act for a second. This is none of your business. You haven't been part of this family for 20 years. Move. I am not moving, Elias said, staring her down. And looking at that dress, Serena, neither should you. You look like you are auditioning for a wedding that already happened. A titter of laughter rippled through the room. Serena's face flushed pink. How dare you, she hissed. I am the maid of honor's sister. I can wear whatever I want. You are a guest, Will's voice cut in. Will stepped up beside me, taking my hand. He didn't look at Arthur or Serena. He looked at the security guards standing by the main doors. Actually, Will corrected himself, his voice icy. You are barely that. You are late. You are disruptive. And you are upsetting my wife. Wife? Arthur blinked, as if the word physically struck him. You went ahead with the ceremony? Of course we did, I spoke up, stepping out from behind Elias's protection. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see the sapphires in my hair and the ring on my finger. Did you think I would pause my life because you decided to play hero for Serena again? I didn't play hero, Arthur protested, looking around the room, seeking allies. She was sick. Tell them. Serena, tell them how sick you were. Serena opened her mouth to launch into her rehearsed speech about anxiety and palpitations. Save it, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel. We know, Serena. We know all about the panic attack. We know all about the crisis. I looked at Chloe, who was standing by the DJ booth, her hand hovering over a laptop. She gave me a nod. We prepared a little slideshow, I said, a smile touching my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. To celebrate the family, since you are here, why don't we watch it together? Arthur looked confused. Slideshow? That is nice. Honey, see? We can still have a nice time. Serena, however, went still. Her eyes darted to the large projection screen that had been lowered behind the head table. Her survival instinct, honed by years of manipulation, was screaming at her. No, she said quickly. We don't need a slideshow. Let's just get a drink. Daddy needs a drink. I insist, I said. It is the highlight of the evening, I nodded to Chloe. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The hum of the projector fan whirred to life. A giant rectangle of light hit the screen. The storm had arrived, and this time, I was the one controlling the lightning. The hum of the projector cooling fan was the only sound in the room, a low mechanical whir that underscored the suffocating silence. The rectangle of light on the screen behind the head table was blank for now, a blinding white canvas waiting for paint, but the threat of it hung heavy in the air. Arthur Claiborne did not look at the screen. He was too focused on the man standing between us. He looked at Uncle Elias with a mixture of fear and bruised ego, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. The sight of his banished brother, standing tall, dignified, and wearing the tuxedo Arthur should have been wearing, seemed to short-circuit his brain. He couldn't process the fact that he had been replaced. He could only process the insult. "You," Arthur spat, pointing a shaking finger at Elias. "You have some nerve showing your face here. After 20 years? You think you can just waltz in and steal my place? That is my daughter. That was my walk." "It was an open position," Elias said, his voice calm and leveled like a shotgun barrel. "You vacated the post. Arthur, I just filled the vacancy." "I did not vacate anything," Arthur roared, turning his desperation toward me. He looked frantic, his eyes pleading for me to validate his delusion. "Louise, tell him I texted you. Tell him I said I was coming. I was just late. You could have waited. You should have waited." What kind of daughter doesn't wait 10 minutes for her own father? The accusation hit me like a physical slap. You should have waited. Even now, standing in a disheveled tuxedo with alcohol on his breath. He was making me the villain. He was rewriting history to make my punctuality the crime and his negligence the victim. I opened my mouth to speak, to scream. But Will beat me to it. My husband took a step forward. He did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as he spoke. "We waited," Will said. The words were clipped, precise, and lethal. "We waited 28 years. Arthur, today was just the deadline." "I sent a text," Arthur protested, pulling his phone out of his pocket with fumbling hands. "I told her I was dealing with a crisis. Serena was—" "Serena was what?" Will interrupted, cutting him off. "Dying? Bleeding? Or was she just needy?" "She passed out," Arthur shouted, gesturing wildly at Serena, who was standing beside him, clutching her clutch purse like a shield. "She fainted dead away at the venue. Her heart rate was through the roof. The paramedics said it was stress. I couldn't leave her alone in an ambulance, could I? I am a father. William, you will understand one day. When your child is sick, you don't look at a clock." Serena seized the opening. She stepped forward, her eyes swimming with practiced tears, her lower lip trembling. She looked every inch the fragile flower, the victim of a cruel biology that made her faint at inconvenient times. "It is true," Serena whimpered, looking at the crowd, then at me. I was terrified. "Louise, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I told Daddy to go. I swear I did. I said, 'Daddy, go to Louise. She needs you.' But he wouldn't leave me. He was too worried. And then, when I finally came to, we rushed here. We ran every red light. And now you are all looking at us like we are monsters." She dabbed at her eyes, careful not to smudge her mascara. "It was a misunderstanding," she continued, her voice gaining strength, pitching itself to reach the back tables. "Just a terrible, chaotic misunderstanding. We love you, Louise. We are here now. Isn't that what matters? Can't we just start over? Daddy wants to give a toast. He wrote a beautiful speech." A few guests at the back tables murmured. I could see the doubt creeping in. Serena was good. She was world-class. She was spinning a narrative of medical emergency and parental sacrifice that was designed to make me look like a heartless bridezilla who cared more about a schedule than her sister's health. If I argued with her now, without proof, I would look petty. I would look ungrateful. Arthur saw the shift in the room. He puffed up his chest, sensing a reprieve. "Exactly," Arthur said, smoothing his rumpled shirt. "A misunderstanding. Now, if Elias will kindly step aside, I would like to hug my daughter and welcome my new son-in-law into the family properly. He took a step toward me. Stop, a voice rang out. It wasn't me. It wasn't Will. It wasn't Elias. It was Chloe. My maid of honor stepped out from behind the DJ booth. She was holding a microphone in one hand and her smartphone in the other. She didn't look like a bridesmaid. She looked like a prosecutor closing a murder case. She walked to the center of the dance floor, her heels clicking rhythmically on the parquet. She didn't turn on the microphone yet, but her voice was trained for projection. A medical emergency, Chloe repeated, looking directly at Serena. That is fascinating. Serena, truly, because I have a question. Serena narrowed her eyes. This is a family matter. Chloe, stay out of it. Oh, I am family, Chloe smiled, but it was a smile that promised violence. I am the family that Louise chose, and as her family, I am just confused about the timeline. Chloe held up her phone. The screen was black. You said you fainted, Chloe said, tilting her head. You said you were in an ambulance. You said you were unconscious. I was, Serena snapped. I was out for 20 minutes. Right, Chloe nodded. And what time was this? Around 3:30, Arthur interjected, eager to corroborate the lie. Just as I was supposed to get on the helicopter, she collapsed right in the lobby. 3:30? Chloe repeated. Okay, so, if you were unconscious at 3:30 and dealing with paramedics until 4, and then rushing here. She tapped her phone screen. It lit up. Then how do you explain the check-in at the Sapphire Lounge at 4 o'clock sharp? The silence that followed was absolute. Serena froze. Her face went from tragic victim to deer in headlights in a split second. I don't know what you're talking about, Serena stammered. I haven't been to a bar in weeks. Really? Chloe asked. Because Instagram says differently. She swiped on her phone and turned the screen outward, facing Arthur first, then panning it slowly toward the nearest tables. For those of you who aren't on Serena's close friends list, Chloe announced, her voice dripping with sarcasm, allow me to describe the image. It is a photo of a table at the Sapphire Lounge. There is a half-empty bottle of Dom Perignon, there is a platter of oysters, and there is Serena's hand. I recognize the snake ring. Very subtle. By the way, holding a martini glass. Serena turned pale. She had forgotten. She had forgotten that Chloe and she had been friends in college. 10 years ago. She had forgotten that she had never removed Chloe from her close friends list because she liked showing off to her. She had forgotten that digital footprints are eternal. That is an old photo, Serena shrieked. I posted that days ago. It is a glitch. A glitch? Chloe laughed. That is funny. Because the caption says, finally escape the boring wedding drama. Thank God for Daddy's credit card. Let the real party start. Chloe looked at Arthur. And the timestamp, Chloe added, driving the nail into the coffin, is 4:02 p.m. today. While Louise was walking down the aisle, Arthur Claiborne stood frozen. He blinked. Once, twice. He looked at the phone screen, squinting to read the small text. He saw the ring. He saw the caption. Thank God for Daddy's credit card. He turned to Serena slowly. His movements were jerky, robotic. You told me you needed water, Arthur whispered. When we left the venue, you said you felt faint and you needed sugar. You said we should stop at that place next door to get you a juice. Serena's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lie, looking for anything to stop the walls from closing in. It was medicinal, Serena tried, but her voice was shrill now. I needed sugar. The alcohol was to calm my nerves. The doctor said, There was no doctor, Arthur shouted. The sound of his voice startled everyone, including himself. It was a roar of realization. We went into the bar, Arthur said, his voice trembling as he pieced the memory together. You ordered a round of drinks. You told me the bill came to $400. You said it was for the emergency services fee. I gave you my card. He looked at his daughter, the golden child, the fragile princess he had protected for 3 decades, and for the first time, He saw the shark beneath the skin. "You were drinking champagne," Arthur whispered, horrified. "While I was texting Louise that I couldn't come, you were laughing. I thought you were hysterical. I thought it was shock." "She was laughing at me." "Dad," I said. I stepped forward. I didn't need the microphone. My voice carried on the wings of my own heartbreak. "She wasn't in shock," I told him, looking him dead in the eye. "She was celebrating. She won. She got you to stay. She got you to miss my wedding." That was the victory toast. The crowd began to whisper. The sound started low and rose quickly, a buzzing hive of judgment. I heard the words, disgusting, cruel, and unbelievable floating through the air. The social elite of Chicago were turning on them. The mask had slipped, and the face underneath was ugly. "No!" Serena grabbed Arthur's arm, her nails digging into his tuxedo jacket. "Daddy, don't listen to them. They are jealous. Chloe always hated me. She photoshopped it. Louise is trying to turn you against me." "It is on your phone." "Serena?" Chloe yelled, pointing at the clutch purse in Serena's hand. "Unlock it. Show us. Prove me wrong." Serena clutched the purse tighter to her chest, her knuckles white. That gesture was an admission of guilt louder than any confession. Arthur pulled his arm away from Serena's grip. He looked at her as if she were a stranger. Then he looked at me. "Louise," he stammered, taking a step toward me, his hands shaking. "I didn't know. I swear to you. She told me she was dying. She was gasping for air. I thought I was losing another daughter. I couldn't risk it." He looked pathetic, a man who had spent his life being played like a violin. Finally, hearing the screeching discord of the music. "You didn't know because you didn't want to know," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard clarity that was almost peaceful. "You chose to believe her," I continued, closing the distance between us until I was standing right in front of him. "Just like you chose to believe her when she said she had food poisoning at my graduation. Just like you chose to believe her when she said she needed my tuition money for her business. Just like you chose to believe her every single time she painted herself as the victim and me as the ghost. I was trying to be a good father," Arthur pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. "I was trying to be fair." "Fair?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Dad, you haven't been fair since Mom died. You have been a hostage. You have been so afraid of her tantrums, so afraid of her guilt trips, that you sacrificed me to keep the peace. You fed me to the wolf to keep it from biting you." I pointed at the screen where the projection was waiting. "But the worst part?" I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he and Serena could hear. "The worst part is not that you believed her. The worst part is that she thinks you are stupid. She laughs about it. She brags about it." "What?" Arthur frowned. "Show him the rest." "Chloe," I commanded. "No," Serena screamed, lunging toward the projection table. "Don't you dare!" But Will was faster. He stepped in her path, blocking her with his broad frame. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, an immovable object. "Sit down, Serena," Will said. "The show is just starting." Chloe hit the spacebar on the laptop. The screen behind us flashed to life. It wasn't the Instagram photo. It was the screenshot from the WhatsApp group. The message Serena had sent by mistake. The message she thought she had deleted. The text appeared in massive, high-definition letters, 10 feet tall. "Is she panicking yet? Do not answer her calls. Dad, just say traffic if she gets through. I need another round. This margarita is killer." The gasp from the room was sucked out of the air. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a collective intake of breath, followed by a silence so profound you could hear the ice melting in the buckets. Arthur read the words. He read them once. He read them twice. "Dad, just say traffic. This margarita is killer." He looked at the words. Then he looked at the timestamp. It was sent while he was in the car with her, while he was holding her hand, thinking she was having palpitations. The realization broke him. His shoulders slumped. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. The narrative he had built for himself. The narrative of the overburdened. Loving father trying to manage two difficult daughters. crumbled into dust. He wasn't a martyr. He was a punchline. You. Arthur turned to Serena. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent room, it carried. You were texting this while I was praying you wouldn't have a heart attack. Serena didn't answer. She couldn't. She stood there, stripped of her lies, naked in her cruelty. She looked small. She looked mean. She looked exactly like what she was, a bully who had finally picked a fight she couldn't win. You made me miss it, Arthur said, his voice rising, cracking with a pain that was finally real. You made me miss walking her down the aisle. For a margarita? It wasn't just a margarita, Serena screamed back, cornered and vicious. It was about her. She always gets everything. She gets the career. She gets the rich husband. She gets the perfect life. Why should she get the perfect wedding too? Why does she get to be happy while I'm miserable? Because she works for it. Serena, Arthur shouted. It was the first time in my life I had ever heard him raise his voice at her. She works for it, Arthur yelled, his hands balling into fists. And you just take, you take and you take and you take, and I let you. My God, I let you take everything. He turned to me. His eyes were swimming with tears. But I felt nothing. The apology was 20 years too late. Louise, he choked out. I am so sorry. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't give me my walk back. Dad, sorry doesn't fix the mirror I broke this morning. And sorry, don't buy you a seat at this table. I turned to Will. I think we are done here, I said. Agreed. Will nodded. The deception was revealed. The wound was open, and for the first time in history, the infection was being cut out. The image on the projection screen did not flicker. It hung there, 10 feet tall and high definition, a digital tombstone for Serena's reputation. The white text bubble against the green background was sharp enough to slice through the atmosphere of the ballroom. Is she panicking yet? Do not answer her calls, Dad. Just say traffic if she gets through. I need another round. This margarita is killer. The silence in the room was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. 300 people were reading those 32 words. I watched their eyes move left to right, processing the syntax of cruelty. I saw my Aunt Sarah's hand cover her mouth. I saw Mrs. Vanderwall put down her champagne flute as if the glass had suddenly turned hot. They were not just seeing a mean text. They were seeing the architecture of a 20-year abuse cycle laid bare. Serena was the first to break the vacuum. It is fake, she shrieked. Her voice was unrecognizable, a high, thin sound like tearing metal. She spun around to face the crowd, her cream dress swirling around her like a shroud. It is Photoshop! She made it up! She is jealous because Daddy loves me more. So she forged it. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You are sick, Louise. You are a liar. That is not my number. That is not my account. I did not speak. I did not have to. I simply lifted my hand and made a small, circular motion with my index finger toward the tech booth. The projectionist. A young man named Kevin, whom I had tipped $200 before the reception began, followed his instructions perfectly. The image on the screen changed. It zoomed in. It did not zoom in on the text. It zoomed in on the metadata at the top of the screenshot. The contact name was clearly visible. Serena, Maine. But more damning was the profile picture next to the name. It was a photo of Serena and Arthur, taken last Christmas. A photo that had never been posted online. A photo that only family members had access to. And then, the timestamp. Today at 3:45 in the afternoon. 3:45, I said. My voice was amplified by the microphone Chloe had handed me. But I kept the volume conversational. It was more terrifying that way. At 3:45, Dad, you were in the car with her. You were holding her hand. You were texting me that you couldn't come because she was hyperventilating. You were telling me to be strong. I looked at the screen, then back at my father. And while you were doing that, I continued, she was typing this. She wasn't struggling to breathe. She was struggling to type fast enough to order another drink before you noticed. Arthur Claiborne was staring at the screen. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide and glassy. He looked like a man who had been hit by a train he had spent his whole life claiming didn't exist. He read the words, "Dad, just say traffic over and over again." "You called me traffic," Arthur whispered. The microphone picked it up. "I was traffic?" He turned to Serena. The adoration that had filled his eyes for 32 years was gone, replaced by a horrifying, dawning comprehension. "I missed walking Louise down the aisle," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "Because you wanted a margarita? Because you wanted to win?" "No!" Serena grabbed his lapels. Shaking him, she looked deranged now, her perfect makeup beginning to melt under the heat of her panic. "Daddy, look at me. It is a trick. Louise hacked my phone. She is trying to ruin us. She hates us." "She hates us?" Arthur pulled away from her grip, stumbling back. "She invited us. She waited for us. She paid $5,000 for a helicopter for me, and you sat in a bar and laughed about it." "It is an old text," Serena screamed, pivoting to a new lie, her eyes darting wildly. "It is from her graduation. It is from years ago." "The timestamp says today." "Serena," Will said. His voice was deep, authoritative, cutting through her hysteria like a blade. "And unless you invented time travel along with your medical condition, that message was sent 45 minutes before you walked into this room." The crowd began to murmur again, the sound rising like a tide. I heard the word sociopath whispered more than once. The shame was palpable. It was thick enough to choke on. Serena looked around the room, realizing that her audience, the people she lived to impress, were looking at her with revulsion. She had lost them. She had lost the narrative. And when a narcissist loses control of the narrative, they choose violence. "Turn it off!" Serena screamed, her face twisting into a mask of pure, ugly rage. "Turn it off right now! You bitch! You ungrateful little bitch!" She abandoned all pretense of the victim. She kicked off her heels and lunged. She moved fast, a blur of cream silk and fury, aiming straight for me. Her hands were clawed, reaching for my face, for the sapphires in my hair, for anything she could destroy. "I will kill you," she shrieked. "I will tear that dress off you." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground, watching her come. 2 feet before she reached me, a wall of black wool intercepted her. It wasn't Elias. It wasn't Will. It was the head of security, a man named Marcus, whom Will had hired 3 weeks ago specifically for this contingency. Marcus stepped in front of me with the ease of a man closing a door. He caught Serena's wrists in midair, halting her momentum instantly. "Let me go!" Serena thrashed, spitting and kicking. "Get your hands off me! Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice bored. "You are an uninvited guest causing a disturbance." He didn't hurt her, but he didn't let go. He held her there, suspended in her own violence, displaying her madness for the entire room to see. She was panting, her hair wild, her teeth bared. The image of the elegant, successful fashionista was gone. In her place was a toddler having a tantrum. Only this toddler was 32 years old and dangerous. Arthur watched the scene unfold. He watched the security guard restrain his favorite daughter. He watched his youngest daughter stand behind the guard, looking at him with eyes that held no pity. Something inside him broke. His legs gave out. He didn't fall, but he slumped, catching himself on the edge of the head table. He looked old. He looked 10 years older than he had when he walked in. "Louise," he croaked. He reached a hand out toward me, over the white tablecloth. "Louise, please." I looked at his hand. It was shaking. "I didn't know," Arthur sobbed. The tears were real now. They were the ugly, snotty tears of a man who has realized he threw away a diamond to keep a stone. "I swear on your mother's grave, I didn't know." I thought she was sick. I would never have missed it if I knew. You have to believe me. I am your father. I love you. He tried to move toward me, stumbling past Elias. Let me fix this. Let me make it right. We can do the dance. We can do the father-daughter dance right now. Just tell them to play the song. Please, honey, forgive me. He looked pathetic, and for a microsecond, the old habit kicked in, the habit of fixing him, the habit of smoothing things over, the habit of saying, "It is okay, Dad, I understand." But then I felt the weight of the comb in my hair, the comb he had tried to pawn. I took a breath to speak, but a navy blue figure stood up from the table. Eleanor Sterling. She did not need a microphone. Her voice was trained in boardrooms where she commanded fleets of ships and thousands of employees. She projected her voice with a steel resonance that silenced Arthur instantly. "Sit down. Arthur," Eleanor commanded. Arthur froze, looking at her. "Eleanor, please. This is a family matter." "No," Eleanor said, walking around the table until she stood between him and me. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she towered over him. "This became a public matter the moment you walked into my son's wedding reception with a liar on your arm and an insult on your lips." She looked him up and down with withered disdain. "You want to apologize?" Eleanor asked, her voice dripping with ice. "You want forgiveness? You do not have the currency to afford it. Arthur, you are bankrupt." "She is my daughter," Arthur pleaded, pointing at me. "I made a mistake. Parents make mistakes." "You didn't make a mistake," Eleanor snapped. "You made a choice. You have been making the same choice for 20 years. I have heard the stories. Arthur, I know about the graduation. I know about the business loans. I know about the mother's jewelry." Arthur flinched at the mention of the jewelry. He looked at Elias, who was watching him with grim satisfaction. "You broke her heart 1,000 times because it was easier than dealing with that." Eleanor gestured to Serena, who was still struggling in Marcus's grip. "You sacrificed Louise's happiness to buy yourself peace and quiet. That is not parenting. That is cowardice." She took a step closer to him, invading his space. "And today?" Eleanor continued, her eyes blazing. "Today was the day you were supposed to redeem yourself. Today was the one day you had to show up, and you failed. You let a text message and a fake tear keep you from the most important walk of her life. You don't get to ask for a dance now. You don't get to play the doting father because you got caught. You lost that privilege when you got in that car with her." I, Arthur stammered, looking for a defense that didn't exist. "You have no right to be here," Eleanor finished, her voice final. "You are not a father today. You are just a guest who arrived late and dressed poorly." She turned her back on him. It was a dismissal so total it felt like a physical blow. Arthur stood there, swaying slightly. He looked at me again, his eyes desperate, begging for me to contradict her, begging for me to be the doormat one last time. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had missed my life. I lifted the microphone to my lips. My hand was steady. My heart was slow and rhythmic. I didn't feel the urge to cry. I felt the urge to end it. "She is right, Dad," I said. My voice filled the room, calm and terrifyingly reasonable. "You kept telling me to understand Serena," I said. "You kept telling me to be the bigger person. You kept telling me that family supports family. Well, I finally understand." I looked at Serena, then back to him. "I understand that you never saw me," I said. "You only saw the daughter who didn't need you, so you gave everything to the one who consumed you. You didn't love us equally. You didn't even love us differently. You feared her, and you forgot me." Arthur opened his mouth, a sob escaping his throat. "Louise, no." "But it is okay," I said, and I meant it. "Because I found people who remember me." I gestured to Will, to Elias, to Eleanor, to Chloe. "I have a family. Arthur," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. The sound of it severed the last cord binding us. I have a father who walked me down the aisle. I have a mother who defends me. I have a sister who tells the truth. And I have a husband who chooses me. I lowered the microphone slightly, looking him dead in the eye. You are just a man who shares my last name, I said. And honestly, I am changing that name tonight. The room was silent. Even Serena had stopped thrashing. Realizing the magnitude of what had just happened, I turned to the security guards. Marcus, I said softly. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, Marcus replied. Please show Mr. Claiborne and his +1 to the exit, I said. They are trespassing. Arthur looked at me with horror. Louise, are you kicking me out? Of your wedding? You didn't come to my wedding. Dad, I said, cold as winter. You came to Serena's after party, and that party is over. I turned away. I didn't watch Marcus take his arm. I didn't watch Serena start screaming again as they were dragged toward the doors. I looked at Will. He was smiling at me, a look of awe on his face. I had dropped the match. The bridge was burning, and the fire was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The silence that followed my declaration was different from the silence that had come before. It was not the silence of shock, nor the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a vacuum, a space where something old had been removed, and the world was waiting to see what would rush in to fill it. Arthur Claiborne stood near the exit, flanked by the security guards. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The imposing stature of the successful businessman, the patriarch who commanded rooms and boardrooms, had evaporated. In his place stood an old man in a rumpled tuxedo, his face gray with the ashes of his own bridges. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were not angry, they were terrified. They were the eyes of a man realizing that he was about to walk out into a winter of his own making. And he had left his coat behind. I held the microphone. It felt heavy in my hand, like a gavel. Dad, I said. The word tasted strange, like a habit I was breaking in real time. Connie, my therapist, told me once that I spent my entire childhood auditioning for a role that had already been cast. I spent 28 years trying to be the daughter you wanted. I got the grades, I got the job, I found the husband, I never asked for money, I never caused a scene. I made myself as small and as perfect as a diamond, hoping that if I shone bright enough, you would finally look away from the black hole that is Serena. I took a step forward, the train of my dress trailing behind me like white water. But today, I continued, my voice steady, I realized something. I realized it when I looked at the empty chair next to the aisle. I realized it when I looked at Uncle Elias, who drove like a maniac just to hold my hand. I realized it when I looked at Eleanor, who defended me like a lioness. And I realized it when I looked at Will, who never once let go of me. I gestured to the people standing behind me, my wall, my fortress. I realized that I do not need to audition anymore, I said. I already got the part. I have a family, Arthur, a real one. A family that does not make me beg. A family that does not make me choose. A family that shows up. And in this family, there are no empty seats. Arthur let out a sound, a choked, wet sob that seemed to tear his throat. He reached out a hand, trembling, toward me. Louise, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I will change. I promise. I looked at his hand. I felt a phantom ache in my chest, the ghost of the little girl who would have run to him. But the woman standing in the St. Regis Ballroom remained motionless. You had 28 years to change, I said softly. Time is up. I turned my head slowly, shifting my gaze to Serena. She was no longer screaming. She was panting, her chest heaving against the restraint of the security guard. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles, her mascara smeared in raccoon circles around her eyes, the cream silk dress, the weapon she had worn to wound me, was twisted and wrinkled. She looked stripped. She glared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. You think you won, Serena hissed. Her voice was raw, scratching against the silence. You think you are so special because you humiliated us? You are nothing. Louise, you are just the boring little sister. Daddy will forgive me. He always forgives me. And we will laugh about this. We will laugh about how pathetic you were. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel intimidation. I didn't even feel anger. I felt pity. It was a cold, distant pity, like looking at an insect trapped in amber. You still don't get it, do you? I asked, tilting my head. This isn't a competition. Serena, there is no winning or losing here. There is only reality. I walked closer to her, stopping just out of reach of her clawed hands. You didn't win, I told her, my voice dropping to a register of absolute finality. You never won. You were never the favorite. Serena, you were just the loudest. You were the broken thing that demanded all the glue. And Dad? He didn't love you more. He just feared you more. He was a hostage to your misery. Serena flinched. The truth hit her harder than any physical blow. You are 32 years old, I said, mercilessly holding up the mirror she had avoided her entire life. And look at you. You are being dragged out of your little sister's wedding because you couldn't stand not being the center of attention for 5 hours. You are not a queen. You are not a star. You are just a sad, empty woman who has to step on her own blood to feel tall. I leaned in, whispering the final verdict. And guess what? I am moving my foot. I am not your stepping stone anymore. You are going to have to learn to walk on your own. And looking at you now, I don't think you know how. Serena opened her mouth to scream, to curse, to spew more venom, but the words died in her throat. She looked around the room. She saw the faces of the Chicago elite, the people whose approval she craved like oxygen. They were looking at her with disgust. They were looking at her like she was something they had stepped in. The realization shattered her. She slumped in the guard's grip, defeated not by me, but by her own reflection. I straightened up and turned to Marcus, the head of security. Marcus, I said, my voice ringing clear. Please escort Mr. Claiborne and his guest off the premises. This is a private party, and neither of them is on the list. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, Marcus said. He signaled to the other guards. They began to move. It was a slow, agonizing procession. Arthur Claiborne was not dragged. He was guided, but the effect was the same. He walked with the heavy, shuffling steps of a condemned man. As he reached the double doors, he stopped. He turned back. He looked across the vast expanse of the ballroom. He looked past the tables, past the flowers, past the guests. He looked right at me. I was standing in the center of the dance floor. To my left stood William Sterling, my husband, looking at me with awe. To my right stood Elias Claiborne, my uncle, looking at me with pride. Behind me stood Eleanor Sterling, my mother-in-law, looking at me with respect. We were a phalanx. We were a unit. We were complete. Arthur looked at the tableau. I saw the realization hit him. He saw what he had traded. He saw the warmth, the strength, and the love that he had exiled himself from. He realized, in that split second before the end, that he had not just lost a daughter. He had lost the only person who had ever truly loved him without condition. He was leaving the light to go into the darkness with a monster he had created. His mouth opened, perhaps to say my name one last time, but the guard gently touched his elbow. "Time to go, sir," the guard said. Arthur slumped. He turned away. Serena was less dignified. She was sobbing now, a high, keen wail of self-pity as she was marched out beside him. The heavy doors began to close. I watched them narrow the gap. I watched the sliver of my father's face disappear. Thud. The doors clicked shut. They were gone. For 3 seconds, the room was absolutely silent. It was a suspended moment, as if the entire congregation was holding its breath, processing the exorcism they had just witnessed. Then, it started. It began with a single clap, I think it was Chloe. Then Eleanor joined in. Then Elias. And then the room exploded. It was not the polite applause of a wedding toast. It was a roar. It was thunderous. People were standing up, cheering, whistling. It was the sound of 300 people acknowledging that something right had just happened. They weren't applauding the drama. They were applauding the boundary. They were applauding the fact that the girl who had walked in with a substitute father was standing there as a queen. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Uncle Elias. His eyes were red-rimmed, swimming with tears, but his smile was wide enough to crack his face. "You did good, kid," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You did real good." He pulled me into a hug, a real hug, crushing and smelling of tobacco and lake water and safety. "Your mom," Elias whispered into my hair. "She is up there right now, and she is raising a glass. She is so proud of you. Louise, you have no idea. You finished the fight she couldn't." "We finished it," I whispered back, holding him tight. "We finished it." He let me go and stepped back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "All right, enough of the weeping. You have a husband waiting." I turned to Will. He was standing there, watching me. He hadn't moved. He had let me handle my own battles, standing guard but never stealing my sword. That was who he was. That was why I loved him. He held out his hand. I looked down at my feet. The white satin heels I was wearing were beautiful, but they were pinching my toes. They were uncomfortable. They were shoes I had bought because Serena had told me they made my calves look better. I reached down. I unbuckled the left strap, then the right. I kicked the shoes off. They skidded across the parquet floor, landing somewhere near the head table. I stood there in my bare feet, grounding myself. I felt the vibration of the floor, the coolness of the wood. I dropped an inch in height, but I felt 10 feet taller. I looked up at Will and smiled. It wasn't the practiced smile of the bride. It wasn't the polite smile of the creative director. It was a smile that started in my toes and rushed up to my eyes. It was the first real, unencumbered smile I had smiled in 20 years. "Hi," I said. "Hi," Will said, his voice thick. "You okay?" "I am," I said, and the words felt solid. "I am really, actually okay." I took his hand. "Music, please," Chloe shouted from the DJ booth. The lights dimmed, turning the room into a soft, twilight blue. The spotlight hit us, carving out a circle of brilliance in the center of the darkness. The opening notes of At Last by Etta James began to play. Cliché, perhaps, but tonight it was gospel. Will pulled me close. I rested my head on his shoulder, my arms wrapping around his neck. We began to sway. I closed my eyes. I didn't look at the door. I didn't wonder if my father was still in the parking lot. I didn't wonder if Serena was posting on social media. I didn't care. They were characters in a book I had finished reading. I had closed the cover and put it back on the shelf. I was here, in this room, in this light. I could feel the warmth of Will's chest. I could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. I could smell the scent of his cologne mixed with the faint, sweet smell of the peonies in the room. I was the bride. I was the wife. I was the daughter of Elias and the daughter-in-law of Eleanor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't a supporting character in Serena's tragedy. I tightened my grip on Will, burying my face in his neck. "I am here," I whispered to the universe. "I know," Will whispered back, kissing the top of my head. "Welcome home, Louise." The song swelled, the world spun, and in the center of the spotlight, I danced. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was an emotional journey to write, and I hope you felt every moment of Louise's struggle and ultimate triumph. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow across the globe. Do not forget to subscribe to BitterSweet Drama Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel, and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need a reminder that family is who you choose. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.